like being Heather?
Look, I don't put my head up very often. I've lived in Brisbane now for 10 years. I came from London. Just occasionally when, if sort of something comes through the ether, I sort of turn up and say a few things. And I'll tell you why I only pop my head up once in a while, a bit later on. But I did have some extensive remote viewing with Professor Courtney Brown at Atlanta in 1996. And they're very interesting times. And I did some more training with Glenn Wheaton, who was a sergeant in the Special Forces Intelligence Unit. And I'll talk to you about the differences between them. But I want to start off by talking about, many of you will be aware that there has been a lot written about remote viewing on the internet over the years, okay? Most of which is complete and utter nonsense, all right? The general consensus, according to the internet, is that it didn't really work that well, remote viewing in the early days. And I'm not going to give you an extensive history because we'll be here for 3 hours just doing that. But basically, it worked spectacularly well. Okay, remote viewing worked so well it was used for intelligence gathering in the armed forces of the United States. Now, it's not used as a standalone intelligence collecting tool, okay, but it was used in conjunction with other intelligence tools, and it was highly successful. There were around 20 to 30 individuals who were used regularly in remote viewing and were spectacularly successful time and time again. Now, it's a trainable skill, okay? I'm not a psychic. I would never say that I'm a psychic, and you know, some people want to bill you as a psychic, but you're not really. There is no such thing as psychic. I mean, from where I am now, with the experience I've gained, it's just not true. There's no such thing as a psychic, okay? Everybody has the ability to do this. And just like some people are good at playing the piano and learn it very quickly, some people will take longer to learn it, still they can still learn to play the piano. Okay, so remote viewing is something that you can learn. It's a trainable skill. In fact, to say that it's learning is probably the wrong word to use. It's more of an unlearning. Okay, you're actually shedding layers and revealing your intuition underneath that's always been there. Okay, so it was very, very successful. And Glenn Wheaton, one of the men who taught me, he's no longer in the army, but he does tell us on good authority that it's still being used today. Now, the stuff I'm going to show you today is in a way sort of primitive. Okay, it's quite basic remote viewing what I'm going to show you, because they have a box that they can basically put onto your head, and it takes you into a theta wavelength, and there's a particular wavelength in the theta realm called P6, because each brainwave is broken into smaller waves, like subsets, and the subset of theta is called P6, one of them, and that allows you to go off from remote view. Okay, so you don't need to do stuff on paper, like I do, which I'll show you on the board in a while. You can actually, they have technology now, okay, where you can just go off and you can remote view people in real time. Now, at the end of the 70s, something called biofeedback was around. It's called neurofeedback now, but all the sort of hippies are into changing states and altered states and this kind of thing. And that technology comes directly from biofeedback or neurofeedback that was used in the 70s. And at the end of the 80s, they actually had a working machine where you could just go off and remote view. I mean, there's sort of you see cartoons of people lying back on a couch and going into some mystical trance and going off and viewing something somewhere. And it's just not how it works. I'm sorry to tell you that. I was very sorry myself when I found out it didn't work like that. But so there is now technology that's taken over. And somebody has hinted that now we actually have pharmaceuticals that can actually enhance your extrasensory perception. Now, when I came back to England, it must have been sometime in 1997, around the end of that year, I got an email from a man, and he said to me, I really like that website you've done about remote viewing. You know, it's not new age, it's not alternative, you've just explained the facts and you've made it accessible for mainstream people to read, you know. Because it was all being done in a new age way then, you know. Nothing against the new age community, I love the new age community, but they sometimes get a bit too new age, you know. So I tried to do it in a very sort of matter-of-fact way. So he sent me an email, this guy, and he said to me that about 2 years ago, I was homeless, and a car drew up where I was dossing one night underneath a bridge. He was just sleeping there. And two men got out, and of course it was a classic black car with black windows, you know. And he got out of the car, and two men got out, and they said to this guy, if you take these tablets, we'll give you some money for taking these tablets, you see. So he took his tablets. And nothing happened for about 3 weeks. And after 3 weeks, he told me that he started to pick up people's thoughts around him, who were quite near him. Not word for word, but he could pick up their intentions, and he could pick up their thoughts and their feelings, but not exactly like in every sentence. And they did pay him some money. And they paid him enough money for him to get himself off the street. So I wrote him another email. I thought, oh, I've got some guy here who's a bit kooky, see? But the way that he'd written the email was so eloquent, so educated, it just didn't come across as a bit flaky, as a bit loony, you know? So anyway, I sent him back an email, and I said, look, can you elaborate on this a bit more? And he just sent me back an email, and he said, that's all I can really say. You know, the money enabled me to get off the streets, and now I've got a job and I'm living somewhere, and the effect has worn off, and I've never seen these people again. So this was in the, as I say, in the late 90s. So I'm pretty sure that by now they've actually developed some pharmaceuticals that can enhance this. But there's a very simple herb called mugwort. Have you heard of mugwort? You can buy it in the valley in the Happy High Herbs shop, I'm told, if the police aren't raiding it that evening. And mugwort has been known for years as the witch's brew. And basically, if you take mugwort probably about 3 times a week, it does mess with your sleep cycles, unfortunately. But if you take it 2 to 3 times a week, it enhances your remote viewing capabilities quite profoundly. Okay. However, having said that, the idea is that if you train in remote viewing, you should be able to sit down without taking any drugs or any supplements or any enhancements and still be able to do it. But sometimes when you're training, and you're going through shedding the training wheel stage, so to speak, sometimes it helps to take something, you know, just to help your confidence and helps to get you rolling along till your training wheels are finished. Okay, so mugwort, it's very inexpensive, and if you ever want to enhance your ESP, you can use that, and it works quite well. It works for about 2 or 3 hours, then the effect plateaus out, and then it wears off again, but it does mess with your sleep cycles, so just be aware if you decide to take it. Now, when you navigate on the ocean, they use a particular time called sidereal time, okay? And a researcher in America called James Woodespot, he noticed that at 1:30 sidereal time, which equates to about 5 o'clock in the morning in Australia, ESP is enhanced by 200 to 300% in human beings. So if you look at all the research on ESP, which he did, he took out all the best ones, and he looked at all the common factors in all of those ESP pieces of research, and he found out that most of them were done around 1:30, what's called local sidereal time. Okay, and you can go on the web, and there's actually like a converter, and you can put your local time in, and it converts it to different hours in sidereal time. So what James Woodespot is trying to do is the next generation of ESP research that comes along will all be done at that time. Now nobody knows why. It's a complete mystery why extrasensory perception in human beings seems to peak around about that time. And again, you have an hour when it peaks, and at 1:30 it plateaus, and for an hour afterwards it peaks off again. Okay? So we do know that hopefully in the future the next generation of research will be able to make it much more solid and stronger so that it will enter into the mainstream. It's tripping into the mainstream gradually. But okay, so just leaving that aside for the time being, I want to tell you, a lot of people ask me if I ever do talks, they say to me, it's all very well you telling us these stories, Lee, about remote viewing, but we don't understand how it's done. We can't really connect what you're saying to sitting down and actually doing a remote viewing session. So what I thought I'd do just for maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes, is to show you some of the beginning protocols. Now, sometimes technical talks can be a bit boring. Let's face it, I've been to technical talks and they're still going on about something 3 quarters of an hour and I get bored. I want to hear stories and tales and things, okay? But I have found that people can't always connect with what I'm saying with what actually remote viewing is. So is anybody unhappy if I showed you a few protocols? Is everybody okay with that? Quite a fight bunch here. I've been sitting here all week. But yeah, you okay? So have we got a pen, Cheryl? Is there a pen here? Okay. So what happens is, remote viewing isn't something you do lying on a couch going into a mystical trance. I'm sure there are some people in the world who can do that, but sadly I can't. Okay? So I'll show you how it's done. Okay? Now, Imagine, if you can, that you've got a stack of white A4 paper in front of you, okay? Maybe say 10 or 12 pages of ordinary white A4 paper, okay? So I'll divide this, and we'll pretend this is A4 paper, okay? Now, you have a piece of paper in front of you. You spend about 10-15 minutes just quieting your mind, and Courtney Brown was teaching transcendental meditation, okay, which I had been doing a couple of years before I went, because it just calms your mind down, and it tends to synchronize both hemispheres of your brain, which is important because information comes in via your right hemisphere of your brain. Remote viewing is right hemispheric function skill. All right? So you sit down and you have a particular type of pen. Now, everyone thinks this is a joke when I tell them this, but it's not a joke. The Army researched different pens to remote view with, okay? And this pen is the optimum pen. It's by the Mitsubishi Pencil Company, a Japanese company, and it's called the Uniball Fine Pen, okay? And in a moment, the reason will be revealed as to why you use this pen, okay? Suspense is killing you, isn't it? Okay, so you have a white sheet in front of you. Now, it's called remote viewing for a reason, okay? We want to go for visual images right off the bat, right from the start, okay? So what we do is, we pick up our pen, well, I'll use this in this case, and on here, on the left-hand side of the page, you write the word ideograms, okay? An ideogram is a written symbol, okay? It'll be clear in a minute what it is. You go to the other side of the paper, and you write down page 1. You drop down and you write your name, Lee, or Fred, or Michael, whatever your name is. You draw a line right to left on the paper, okay? And then the target, or the thing you're going to remote view, is given a coordinate, okay? Which, when these protocols are finished, I'll tell you about, because that's really important to put into context the rest of the stuff I'm going to tell you. Now, let's imagine it's XYZ. You put XYZ, it has a hyphen in the middle, and you put XYZ, okay? Now, you learn that consciously, okay? You bring your hand up? No? I'll give us some questions right at the end of the lecture. So you learn those coordinates. You must learn those coordinates consciously through rote learning. You spend about 45 seconds to a minute just doing that, okay? That's all you do, okay? Then you drop below the line, okay? And when you drop below the line, you're telling your subconscious mind that you're going to remote view the target. Now, remote viewing isn't passive. You have to want to remote view the target, okay? You have to want to do it, because consciousness works by intention. You know what I mean by that? You actually have to want to remote view that target that's shielded by distance, space and time, okay? You can't sit there just whistling out a cup of tea. You've got to focus and concentrate. You want to... I just realised we've met before, haven't we?
Yes.
How are you?
Like Moses.
Yes, how are you? Nice to see you. My memory's getting... I'm having a brain minute. So you drop it below the line, okay, and you write XYZ, XYZ. Now, in your mind's eye, here, okay, in the military, they call it the blackboard, because it's a bit too new age for the military to call it the third eye, or other people call it the pineal gland, isn't it? That's the pineal gland, isn't it? But they call it the third eye, okay, but in the military, they call it the blackboard. Now, when you look up, you actually open pathways in the visual cortex in your brain, okay? Now, when you open pathways in the visual cortex of your brain, sights don't just come from what you're looking at externally in this room. They come from things that are in your subconscious as well. You can see pictures in there, obviously, okay? So it opens your visual cortex, okay? So you put each coordinate and you put it onto your blackboard, and it's usually a good idea to put it in big black letters on a white background, so it's quite impactful, okay? Then, once you've done that, you close your eyes, you say go, and you look into the blackboard area really deeply for about 2 seconds, and you see a basic gestaltic image. Now at this stage, all we're trying to do is make contact with the target. We're not trying to get some big fanciful picture with, you know, with nice ducks and hens running about and flowers on the edge of the lake. You won't get that. all you're going to get is a basic distorted image. So if you were viewing the pyramids, for example, you might just draw that. Okay? So you've got to look deep into the blackboard. 1, 2, pull out again. If you look for longer than 2 seconds, what do you think is going to happen? Have a guess. Imagination. Yeah. Okay? If you look in there for more than a couple of seconds, all you do is start imagining things. And you see people, I mean, I haven't trained anybody in these protocols, but Glenn used to say that when you start training people, they're still there, like 30 seconds later, they're still doing this, you see. And they're still there, I find it, it's too late. Okay? You've only got 2 seconds. Remote viewing protocols are done quickly, so your imagination doesn't have time to kick in. Alright? So you might see a basic shape, like what we call a gestalt. You might see a building. It could just be a square that you see. Okay? Now you might see a domed building, so you might just draw that, or you might draw a circle. Okay? Then you write the word stop at the bottom. And when you begin, if you look into your third eye, you can you see like black blobs and black squares and things going on? After a while, you cut through that clutter and a definite shape will come out of that. It takes maybe 10 or 12 sessions before that happens, but when you first start doing it, you just see blobs and you think, oh God, which shape is it? But if you really focus and have an intention, you see a definite shape comes out of there. Alright? Does that make sense? Does anyone ask a question about that? You're very quiet here, aren't you? They're quiet, Cheryl. Is there a hand? Sorry. What's the hand?
You just print some. We said you print some numbers into your. What can those numbers possibly mean?
They're meaningless numbers. In the beginning, okay, they're actually latitude and longitudinal coordinates.
Yeah.
When they first started the remote viewing program, but what happened is one day somebody got those latitude and longitudinal coordinates wrong, but they still remote viewed the target. So it serves as an address. It's like an address. It's like me writing an address on an envelope, and it knows how to get to London if I send a Christmas card or something, you know. So those coordinates actually serve as an address.
But what can that mean?
Nothing.
Third off.
It means nothing. The thing is, you can actually remote view without the coordinates at all. You only really use them for training purposes. A lot of people who have a lot of experience, they just say, remote view the target, because the target is known to the unconscious, to the collective unconscious mind. Okay, and there's a theory at the moment about the 0 point field, which I'll talk to you about later, which is below the quantum level. Okay, where communication transfer takes place instantly. Okay, so I'll chat about that later, but it's a good question. And I'm going to go through targets very quickly. I don't want to spend all night doing it. So, okay, now the second protocol is again a sheet of paper. So the first one you just put aside. Okay, and again up here you write ideograms, probes. Okay, you move across, you write page 1A, you write your name Lee, you draw a line from left to right, you put the coordinates down there, XYZ hyphen, XYZ hyphen. Now again, every time you go below the line, you're telling your subconscious you're going to target. And after a while, you don't have to say that, it just streamlines. Have you heard of, you must have heard of NLP, a lot of people here from NLP. You've heard of anchoring? Yes. It's an anchor. That's what it is, okay? When you draw that line across from right to left, and you drop beneath the line, that line becomes an anchor, okay? And it cues your subconscious to go to the target, okay? And after a while, it streamlines itself. So this is what you do. You go beneath the line, you write XYZ, XYZ, then you do an ideogram. You do a brief burst, and it comes out, it's called a spontaneous ideogram. It's not a gestaltic ideogram like the first protocol, okay? Now, I'm going to tell you why we use these pens. If you use a biro, the ink doesn't come out in a steady flow. If you did something that quick with a biro, you get a break in the ink flow. If you use this pen, that never happens, okay? That ideogram has to come out in a complete whole, okay? Now, that ideogram contains information. So what we do is we get the pen and we probe it, okay? Not like a probe that you've read about in the magazine. There's a difference. So we get that pen, we literally put the tip of the pen onto the probe, close your eyes, okay? And you feel for whether it is simplex or complex. Okay? And you can discern in a couple of seconds whether that's simple target or a complex. What's a simple target going to be? A brick wall. What's a complex target going to be?
Building.
Yeah, it could be a building with many rooms and lots of activity going on in there. Okay? So you can actually touch that, and again, if you probe it for more than 2 or 3 seconds, what's going to happen? Imagination comes in. So you have to probe it, close your eyes and feel it. You need to really feel it with your whole body. Okay? You will get a perception of something. Okay? Probe it again in a different place. Okay? And the next category here is hard, semi-hard, soft, semi-soft, wet, mushy, or gaseous. And sadly, you have to learn all that. Okay? So you might get an impression that it's hard. Well, what's the difference between semi-hard and hard? Well, it's a subtle difference, isn't it? But you pick it up after a little while. Okay? Now this, by the way, that's basic, that's intermediate, that's advanced. So the intermediate one, you press it again. Okay? Is it man-made, natural, or artificial? That's what you're probing for. Okay? And if it's man-made, you will feel. You feel that's man-made. Okay? Because you've made contact with the target because of this spontaneous ideogram. Okay? Which comes out of you like a burst of energy. Okay? Then, the last one is you want to know if it's static or dynamic. So you probe it again with your pen. And you write down whether it's static or dynamic. I mean, these are all sort of military type terms. It just means is it still or is it moving, doesn't it? But that's all this military jargon. Okay? So then you write the word stop. Then underneath, you do exactly the same thing again. You do it 3 times. X, Y, Z. Okay? And if you're using a biro or a pencil, you'll rip the paper, or you won't get a whole ideogram come out. Then you do the whole thing again, and you write stop, and then you do the whole thing again. So you've got 3 of them. Okay? Now all this protocol is for, as unexciting as it looks, is it gives your mind initial contact with a target. Now, where your consciousness arrives at that target, you don't know. Okay? They say that every single point in space and time is connected to every other point in space and time. Okay? That's what they're saying. Alright? Quantumly and below quantum. Okay? So all you want to do is go out and grasp hold of this target any way you can. Okay? You can't lie off in a mystical trance and go off and arrive there. You have to have a systemic way, a systemized way of doing that. Okay? And it's based on brain research. Carl Pribram, famous neuroscientist, he helped with some of this. Okay? So you didn't want to ask any questions about that. Now you put this paper to one side. Okay? You don't put this paper anywhere. You want to put this paper to one side, and then the next protocol helps you with that. Okay? And by the time I've explained to you how target's written, you'll be able to get a little bit more idea. So then we move to a 3rd sheet of paper. Okay? There is a place where you break away from the paper. Okay? And you sit down and back in a chair, and there are certain breathing exercises you do, and it edges off your carbon dioxide, and a picture that's being downloaded, because all this information is being downloaded into your subconscious by now. Okay? So there's a way of getting that out. So another A4 sheet of paper, and this is called a collection matrix, a data collection matrix. Okay? And this is called the Playfair matrix. And it's called the Playfair matrix because a CIA analyst called Meriwether Playfair, what a beautiful name. You couldn't make that up, could you? This is a true story. Her name was Meriwether Playfair, and she invented this collection matrix. Okay? So you go over here, you put page 1B, draw a line from right to left, put the coordinates in there. I realise I'm doing this quite fast. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to cover so much ground tonight. And you draw another line under there and down there. Now you make little galleys here. You make galleys, okay? Up here you write the word sights, sounds, smells and tastes, textures, and temps. My writing doesn't get any better, does it? We're going to writing course one day. Now, that other sheet of paper you just did, with the ideograms on, the ones that you probed, okay? You point your pen at the word sites, okay? You put your pen on the top ideogram that you just did with the pen quick, and you look up the blackboard and you see visuals, okay? And in there, you can draw the pictogram of what you see. I don't know, you might see a tree or something. Does that look like a tree? Okay, so in there you write pictograms. And then you probe it again for sounds, smells, tastes, and temps. Then you go to the next ideogram and you do another galley, you go to the bottom of the ideogram, and you keep going until no more information comes and you have various entries along there in that matrix. Okay? Because it's military stuff. They want to come along and they want to see what you've got. Okay? They want to actually see something that they can analyse. Because that's how they do their intelligence analysis. Okay? I won't be 1 second, I'll just come to you. Okay? Now, when that's done, by the way, while you're doing this, you know the NLP eye movements of NLP? You know that when you raise your eye above the midline, you look up to the left and that sort of thing, remembered visual images. So if you look up to the left while you're probing the ideogram, you can often see pictures there where you can't see them in other directions. So you go through several different directions and patterns so that you can see something. Okay? But again, you only spend a couple of seconds looking up. If you're looking up for 30 seconds and then you think, oh, here comes a picture, oh dear, it's my mother's dog or something, it's too late, because that's what happens. Okay? So you've got to look up and do it really quickly. Okay? Was there a question there? If you had a question, sorry.
I was just wondering about the squiggle. Was that something you don't even think about? You just
Yeah, if you don't think about
is
it.
something for the mind?
It's a burst of energy from your wrist. You just go like that. And that pen is the only one that does it properly. Okay? And it has quite a dense nib, so when you probe, it doesn't feel too soft. This feels right. I know it sounds crazy, but it's military stuff, and they research all that stuff and do that, you know. Okay, so I'll rub that off. So you have a lot of information fairly quickly, and because your brain is working quickly, okay, and sometimes Glenn would come around and give you a maths problem to do. He says, you what's 5 divided by 4 plus 17? You know, what's going on here? And he's doing that deliberately to distract your conscious mind, so information comes through your subconscious mind. Then you go back again, and you look up, bang, you see a picture. It's there, see? Now, in the next stage, you can start drawing a picture, whichever one you think is the most prominent in those galleys, you can draw a picture of it, and you can label it. But you've got to draw the picture very quickly. You can't spend half an hour doing it, otherwise you end up labeling it with stuff that you've imagined. Okay? Then there's about another 3 or 4 protocols after that, and you do something called edging with a special breathing technique developed by a psychologist in the CIA, where you breathe off, and so you don't retain carbon dioxide. So then that opens up more pictures in your visual cortex, because they found out that if you have a balance of normal gases in your system, it actually suppresses your visual cortex when you close your eyes. But when your carbon dioxide is edged off, that's why it's called edging, those pictures are richer. You can close your mind and actually go back to target again. You do the coordinates again, and you drop below the line, and you breathe off before you've done that. You breathe off your carbon dioxide, and you go below the line, and you can see pictures in your mind much more clearly of what the target is than you could if you've got a normal balanced exchange of gases. When you hyperventilate, you blow off your carbon dioxide. So you're almost in a way hyperventilating. And have you heard of holotropic breathworks? They do that in holotropic breathworks, where you breathe off, you go into an altered state. So that's why they that type of breathing, where they got that type of breathing from. But a CIA psychologist sort of developed that through. Okay, let me talk to you about targets before I go on to tell you some stories. Now, let's pass that around. That's something you might be given as a target. Now, it will be in an envelope. Okay, the target will be put in an envelope. All right. Now, if you write the coordinates on the envelope, what do you think is going to happen? Take a guess. What are you going to remote view? We're going to remote view the envelope, aren't you? Okay. And many people have done that. Okay, you've got to put the coordinates on the photograph. Okay, now I'll give you some examples of what I mean by a target. Now, target sounds very hostile and sounds very military, so we'll call it an objective for the sake of it. Okay, so let's imagine we might have So you could write a target like this. You can make a photograph, or you can have, okay? And you put a forward slash, and you write photographic timeline. Now what does photographic timeline mean? It means the precise time and place the photograph was taken. Okay? So you can write that down on a piece of paper, and you can give it a coordinate. You can put 9093, 3112, whatever you want. It doesn't matter. But that coordinate is now assigned to that target. And it acts as an address, just like writing an address on an envelope. It knows where to go. Okay? So that's what you do. Okay? So that's how you, but you must write it on the target. You can't write it on the envelope, otherwise they remote view the wrong thing.
Well, working is better if you have the exact coordinates at the time.
Was it sorry?
Working is better if you have the exact coordinates at the time.
Well, it didn't seem to matter, you see. As I said, originally they were using latitude and longitude. They were trying to get the exact place it was on. But somebody left it off. Because I think what happens if my memory of geography serves me right, they used to have a little symbol on there, didn't they? Is that right? Yeah. But that was left off. So all they had was random coordinates. It wasn't latitude and longitude anymore. It was just random. And they still remote viewed the target. So they just started giving it random coordinates. You actually don't need any coordinates at all. It's only really like for training purposes. You know, I mean, Glenn, who teaches me, forget this, what we're doing here. He's way beyond that. He does something called tagging. And he can actually remote view if I was sitting over there doing a remote viewing target, he can remote view what I'm remote viewing. I'm serious, I'm deadly serious about that. Okay, he found a missing Japanese tourist by doing that. Very, very, very skilled man. 18 years doing it. It's very skilled.
Does he know where MH37 anymore?
I don't know. I don't speak to him regularly. I think we'd all like to know that. There's a lot of things I won't answer to. I'll talk about some of those things in a minute. Does that make sense? So if you see the picture, okay, and you can get people in a room, 20, 30 people, and that first protocol I did, you can give them a target, and they look up to them. And half the people in the class will write down a basic shape, draw a basic shape, and it's exactly the basic shape of the target. It's not rocket science, but you've got to want to do it. You know, it takes a lot of dedication. I was doing 3 or 4 targets a week. I don't remote view that much these days, to be honest. My lifestyle has changed a lot. But between the years 1996 and about 2002, I was remote viewing continuously, doing 3 or 4 targets a week. You can't do 2 a day because they morph.
It's taken from Mexico.
Okay, so you get them mixed up where they can get overload. Okay. Okay, so that just, I thought I'd just briefly tell you how a target is written. Does that make sense? Does that not make sense to anybody? But the issue is that what's even harder to understand, and it's absolutely fantastical, is that you can remote view without any coordinates at all. You can just say, go to the target. And collectively, in the collective unconscious, it's known what the target is.
Even
Right?
without you consciously knowing.
Yeah, you don't have any conscious information up front. You know, because what happens if you know something about the target? What are you going to write down on the paper? Stuff that you're waking up. You're going to start. That's called jargon again. It's called analytical overlay. It's just a posh word for your imagination. It's military stuff. Okay, so that's the problem. So the protocols are designed specifically to keep your conscious mind out of the equation, remembering that something goes this side, your name goes there, you draw a line from right to left, gives your conscious mind something to do to get out of the way. Remote viewing is really a training in how to get out of your own way so that the information comes through, but that takes some time to do. All right? Does that make sense? Does anybody want to ask me any questions about that? Did my picture get lost somewhere? Can you still hear me? Okay. And this was a lovely target that I used to give to people. This was a black flying triangle that was seen over Belgium, and you'll probably remember this quite a few years ago. There was a lot of these black triangles seen, and I gave the coordinate up there. I didn't hyphenate it. I just gave it 4 letters, and people did the very first protocol, and half the class just drew a triangle. That's it. You know, we don't want anything fancy or elaborate at that stage. We just want you to see a basic image in your mind's eye, pull back out of it, draw it. That's it. That's it.
But you want to be in a certain state
No.
the same state.
You don't have to be in an altered state.
What's the connection between you and the person who knows the target?
There isn't one.
But how do you set up the...
Oh, yes, that's it. You have a monitor, okay? You have remote viewing can be done alone. You can pick your target out of a pool of targets, and all you see in the pool of targets is a coordinate. It's not named.
Yeah.
You know, if it's named, it's all over. Okay? So you have to you can do that, or a monitor actually sits with you, okay, and basically gives you that coordinate. Okay? And later on, he can do movement exercises. If he knows you're on, he can say, move to the left of the target. Go 10 feet below the target. Okay, go 10 feet above the target. Just go 20 feet northwest of the target, depending on what it is. Right, so they can do stuff like that. So they may have some knowledge of the target up front, but they're not telling you anything. So that's called a double-blind procedure, which is that if you were doing something in a laboratory, someone said to you, hey, come to the laboratory, we want to test you, you would have double-blind protocols. Okay? Do you know what I mean by that? To make sure it's...
Spell that out.
Double-blind?
Yes. Yeah, I haven't quite got the memory of what that means.
That's right.
Is that even the person telling you doesn't have all the information?
Yeah, they can do, so then it's single-blind.
Yeah.
Okay, you're blinded to it in a single layer. But
Yeah.
double-blind is where you're monitored by somebody, but even they don't know
Yeah.
what it is. They've just been given the coordinates by somebody else
All right.
to keep everything watertight.
Mm.
Okay, so I guess that really we have a collective interest in the extraterrestrial phenomenon. And the reason I went to Courtney Brown to train is because I've been aware of the remote viewing program for a long time, because I subscribed to the Journal of Parapsychology since I was, probably in my early 20s. So I knew that it was going on, and they actually did publish a book about it. It's quite an old one. I've got a copy of it now. And I wanted to find a way to research extraterrestrials. Okay. Now, I'd never had any experiences. I've never seen a UFO. I've had no personal experiences of extraterrestrials or anything like that. You know, there's no abduction signs in my history, or nothing like that at all. Okay. For some reason, I got very interested in that as a boy, 9 or 10, and I read lots of books about it, and it just stayed with me. You know, I never got obsessed by it, but I had a kind of healthy interest in it. You know, so I was looking for a way that I could research that. Okay, and when that came up, I just thought, I'm going to go and do that. Okay, so I went there, and before I got there, they'd done quite a bit of research on the ET stuff. Now, you've got to be a little bit careful with some of the work that Courtney Brown did, because sometimes he wanted to find something. Okay, and if you look for something and want to find it, you usually do. Okay, so luckily he brought another lady in who had a scientific background, and she brought the double-blind protocols in. Okay, and things changed after that. Okay, so what I'm going to talk to you first of all is about Hale-Bopp. Okay, because there's a lot of things that people don't know about the Hale-Bopp comet. Now, we did quite a lot of remote viewing on the Hale-Bopp comet. And first of all, the public weren't totally informed in an honest manner about what happened with Hale-Bopp. Hale-Bopp was the biggest comet that's ever been seen in our skies. It was bigger than Halley's comet. It was said to be about 5 to 10 kilometers in diameter, and it wasn't. It was much, much bigger than that. It was about 80 to 100 kilometers in diameter. Okay. The problem with Hale-Bopp was it wasn't on a stable flight pattern. All right. And what we remote viewed was another object following the Hale-Bopp comet. Okay. It's not in Courtney Brown's books, this stuff. It was called the Hale-Bopp Companion. Okay, and it was following at a sort of discrete distance behind Hale-Bopp. And in some ways it looked kind of like a Saturn-type planet, but it was definitely moving. Okay. Now, round about that time, there were people who did not want Courtney Brown to teach remote viewing publicly. Okay, he knew that there was a lot of people interested in America, and I was the first one to come from Europe because I was living in London at the time, and they didn't want that. Okay, but there was another group of people who wanted remote viewing out into the public arena, and it wanted to start expanding people's minds in that way. Okay, now I don't want to start sort of saying it's good guys versus bad guys, because it's never really as simple as that. There's often 50 shades of grey. Oh, I said 50 shades of grey. But there's often there's different shades of grey there, you know, tinted into the common psyche, isn't it? I can tell you a good joke about that. It's very rude. So basically, people wanted this out there, and they wanted Courtney Brown to be one of the people to get that out there. And Glenn Wheaton was another one, okay? Because of the way their personalities were, they wanted it out there, okay? Other people tried to stop it, okay? Now, it went into the newspapers. Group of remote viewers, psychic spies, and all that nonsense, have said they've seen a companion flying behind Hale-Bopp, okay?
So what year was the Hale-Bopp?
It was 96 through to 97, through to early 97, okay? The Heaven's Gate cult, bless them, there were 12 of them, and they said, this mothership is going to land on Earth, and we're all going to get in it, and we're all going to go away in this UFO. Okay? And the only way that we can do that is if we kill ourselves. So the Heaven's Gate cult will kill themselves. And we got blamed for that. Okay? And what happened there basically was that the people in the intelligence agency were glad that that happened, because they wanted a lid clamped down on what Courtney Brown was doing. They wanted it just squashed down. Okay? Now, 3 days after that came out, families were going to take a class action against us. I mean, they didn't know our individual names or anything like that, you know, but they were going to take a class action against the Farsight Institute. Anyway, what happened was that 3 days later, the Japanese National Observatory published a photo of a companion following Hale-Bopp. Okay? And as it's your lucky day, I've got a photograph of him. He says, hopefully, oh, here it is. Okay? This is a picture taken by the National Japanese Observatory of the companion following the Hale-Bopp comet. That's I put top so you know which way. That's another angle. Okay? There was a companion following Hale-Bopp. Now, what was following it, the remote viewing showed, was an ET craft. Everybody remote viewed that, got that it was extraterrestrial. It was a huge thing. It was it was probably the most huge ET ship ever seen in the skies. Okay, it wasn't visible with the naked eye, although Hale-Bopp comet was, and it was absolutely enormous. I didn't do any more remote viewing on it than that, but Courtney Brown and his associates did more viewing on it, and they said there was a very ancient race of ETs in there. They have never ever come to Earth. Okay, there's a very, I think it's been said now there's about between 42 and 60 species of ETs, sort of connecting with the Earth at some stage, but this species was never seen. Okay, and basically it was following Hale-Bopp because it had an unstable path. It had a very unstable flight path. Okay, the biggest comet ever seen with the naked eye was Halley's Comet. Okay, in 1813, that was the last time it was seen, and this was even bigger than Halley's Comet. It was at least 80 to 100 kilometres in dimension. And we all know what would have happened if that hit Earth. So we're talking extinction if that hit Earth. So that was being monitored by an ET race. Now, here's the problem with remote viewing data, okay? Sorry, what was your name? Jeff. If Jeff comes to me and says, hey, 100 years ago, there was a rumour that someone buried some treasure on my land. Like, okay, Jeff, I'll get a group of remote viewers together and we'll see if we can find it. Okay? So we'll get a group of remote viewers together, we do several sessions, and we try to pinpoint it down to an area on Jeff's land, and we dig up there and we find some treasure. Now that's feedback. Okay, you've got some concrete feedback that you're remote viewing. But if you're going to remote view something following Hale-Bopp and you say it's an ET craft, you can't prove it. You know? You've got remote viewing data from several people that are very highly trained in it, and they've been shown to be proficient in the past, but you can't prove it absolutely, totally, 100% scientifically. Okay? So what I'm telling you is I'm just saying what the remote viewing data shows. okay, that everyone who remote viewed it, it showed that there was a huge craft following it, with an ET race that had never ever been connected with Earth. But they were following it because it had a very unstable flight path, and if it had veered away and hit Earth, even if it hadn't hit Earth, it would have ripped our gravity out. It would have ripped the gravity field out completely, and it would have been like extinction for us. Okay? But those are actual photographs taken by the Japanese National Observatory, and for us, then all of a sudden our remote viewing data had some credibility. You know? Yes, there was an object, and it's been photographed by the observatory after we did the viewing. Okay?
Is this the reason why we never saw any images whatsoever of Hale-Bopp?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was clamped down. The Japanese National Observatory got clamped down. But that came out very quickly in a very short space of time, and a few people found it. And there's still some pictures on the internet of it, though. But there was definitely an object following Hale-Bopp. It followed it all the way around, and it was intelligently guided. Simple as that, because it followed the same trajectory as Hale-Bopp, so you can argue it was definitely intelligently guided. So I just thought I'd share that with you. Anyone want to ask any questions about that? It's very spooky for me, because when I flew home from Atlanta, I'd been there a fair few weeks, and I could see Hale-Bopp on the left. I was sitting on the left window, and I could see Hale-Bopp. And for the 7 hours that I flew home, I just watched Hale-Bopp for 7 continuous hours. And it was a very, I think it was a very emotional thing for me at the time, because I'd just gone somewhere to find out if this thing really worked, and I was going to train and spend a reasonable amount of money on, and it worked. And it worked better than I'd hoped, and it was very emotional for me to watch this Hale-Bopp comet go past the plane or carry on along the side of the plane while I was going home. It was a very profound experience for me in my life. Any questions about that? Because it brings us to the moon.
Excuse me.
Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
Did they know that you guys were remote viewing?
Yeah, they didn't like it. They didn't want it at all.
And could you describe anything within the craft? What it looked like?
No. What I personally got was an extraterrestrial craft. When I say it was from an extraterrestrial origin, it wasn't of Earth. Put it that way. See what I mean? There's a difference between saying it's extraterrestrial and it's not of Earth. There's a kind of subtle difference. So I got it certainly wasn't man-made. Okay, that's where those probes come in. You probe it and you don't get man-made. You know, so that you know that it's not, and that's all
But
the
you never
information.
have one called extraterrestrial. You just call it artificial.
You do, yeah. When you do it, there's another matrix as well. There's another collective matrix, and you write things in there. What are your impressions so far? Okay, and you have to write down quickly what your impressions are. And there's another column for if something keeps coming at you time and time again, you put it in this column and you cross it off, because that might be conscious mind stuff. Okay, but ET stuff kept coming up all the time for that. But when you do your initial probes, it doesn't come up as man-made, it comes up as artificial. All right? So you can compare the two.
So you get the impression that they were guiding it out of harm's way?
Not guiding it. What's the word?
Ensuring that...
Monitoring.
Monitoring. That's a great word. I like that word. Monitoring it. Yeah? It's monitoring it, yeah, because,
Well, they could have vaporised it if they wanted to.
they can't interfere with, to a certain extent, they can't interfere with, I don't know if ETs can vaporise things, I don't know, but to a certain extent they can't interfere in man's
Destiny.
to what way, I mean, we all know about the UFOs over the nuclear silos. If we went to DEFCON, whatever it is, I think they probably would step in, And the issue was that they weren't going to interfere, but they could step in if they needed to. If it suddenly went, I think I'm going to hit Earth today, then I think then you would have seen something would have happened. I don't know whether it would be vaporised. I don't know, but
Well, that wouldn't be a problem.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know what space weapons are available out there, really. But in all seriousness, it was a good word that gentleman used to monitor it, and to do something about it if there was a cataclysmic event or bound to be. So.
Did they get that sense? Did they get that sense of that's what they're doing?
Yeah, definitely.
Was that comet heading towards the planet Earth, or was it just bypassing?
No, it was orbiting around the Earth, then it went back and orbited around the Sun again,
Okay.
and went away again.
So they were monitoring it.
Yeah.
So if it was going to head towards Earth, they might have acted on it.
Yes, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And we've got definite proof.
Okay.
And that photograph came after we did the remote viewing. So then we got some feedback. Then people started to sit up and listen to the Farsight Institute. Okay, I'll tell you a little bit more about the intelligence agencies. They did have some involvement with us. But I want to talk about the moon a bit, okay? Because the moon is obviously very important in all of our lives. And when the Apollo rocket left the lunar module in 1969, we all remember that, don't we? Yeah. Sad. I was only very small. And what happened was the lunar module got left behind and it hit the moon, okay, quite firmly. And the seismic instruments on the orbiter as it left said or registered that the moon rang out like a bell. Okay, and this seismic activity went on for about an hour. And later on, when Apollo 13 blasted off, it left something behind. One of the stages, there's a name for it, I forget what it's called now. One of the stages hit the moon, and it registered seismic activity for 3 hours. Okay? So, we remote viewed the moon based on that evidence. Now, there's some physical evidence there, okay? And the moon is hollow. Okay? When you do your probes, you don't get man-made, you don't get natural, you get artificial. Okay? And when I say the moon is hollow, I don't mean like an Easter egg. You know, I don't mean that you dig down a couple of feet and it's hollow. We're talking about 15 to 20 miles. Okay? And then there's a hollow. Okay? Now, what you can do then once you establish those things with remote viewing data, I'll be with you 1 second, I won't forget. You can then do another remote viewing target on the origins of that. Okay? The origins of the moon, where the moon came from. And what happened in the remote viewing data, and this is going to seem a little bit silly, but bear with me, is that the moon actually had a removalist company. Actually take it from one place and move it into our solar system. And it was put there into orbit and left there. And it's widely known that there are various dusts and rock samples from the moon that have different ages. Okay? All the different moon dust and rocks is aged at very, very different ages. Okay? They found brass on the moon. They found something called Neptunium-127, a compound they found in moon dust which does not exist naturally anywhere that humans have ever found. Okay? Now the other thing is about the moon is that it's pockmarked by craters. And craters, when they hit a planet, they go into the ground and then they get sucked back out again, and it pours the ground inside to a convex shape. It's not concave. You would think that there'd be a big dip left behind, but what it does is the energy actually gets sucked back out and it sucks the ground out and it's left as a convex shape rather than a concave. And all the craters on the moon, almost without exception, at the base, they are convex. Therefore, wherever that moon was millions and millions of years ago, we're talking millions of years, you can tell how old the moon is by the amount of craters on it, because it's been hit so many times by meteorites and comets. That's how we know. If you look at Earth, even though Earth is quite a few million years old, where are the comets and meteorites that have hit the Earth? You can't see them if you look at a map of the Earth. But look at the moon. It looks like a very bad case of acne, doesn't it? Right? And it looks, and that's because of millions of years. That's how we know why that planet is so old. And that's a very simple fact about the moon that you're never told. But you can tell by the amount of craters there that this is millions and millions and millions of years old. And it's been dragged from somewhere else and put into our solar system. Can't prove that, but that's what the remote viewing data says, but you can't prove that physically. But you can prove it has had some resonance tests on it, and you can prove that it rings out like a bell, therefore it must have a hollow core. Somebody said that there was, might have been one of the later Apollo missions when they found a glass bottle on the moon. And the guy said, hey, look at this, and then they cut it out. suddenly cut off of transmission because they have a way of suddenly, you know, there's a switch they and it goes. But look,
We were kicked off the moon
Yeah.
last time. Kicked off the moon.
2 minutes? Okay, I'll just wrap up on the moon quickly. We're going to have a little break. Basically, there was no activity perceived in the centre of the moon. It wasn't like offices and office blocks and ETs running around on it. It's not. It wasn't there. Most of the activity was going on in some of the craters. Now, Sir Patrick Moore, the British astronomer, he said just before he died that he had seen 20 perspex, I won't say perspex, but clear domes on the moon. And he didn't want to publish it. He saw this when he was a young man. He was studying astronomy. He saw like a city of 20 domed sort of buildings on the moon, and he never published that or said that publicly till just before he died. So there's a lot of stuff going on with the moon. Now we look up at the moon every single night and see it, but it's one of our greatest mysteries, and there is an awful lot of ET activity on the moon. And what's really interesting about the moon is that it's been set up so that we never see the dark side of the moon from Earth. I mean, it's like it's been deliberately programmed, set into orbit, so we never see the dark side of the moon. It's fantastically clever. It just simply cannot be natural. It's not possible. Okay? And the chances of the moon moving between us and the sun, when the sun can do its most harm through solar radiation, the chances of that eclipse happening are billions and billions to 1 against chance. And we don't need remote viewing data to know that. That's just, you know, that's just common sense. So the moon has a lot of surprises in store for us still. And the government know. They know what's going on in there. Anyway, any questions about that? We're going to have a break. We'll come back and then we're going to talk about Mars. There's lots of interesting things going on with Mars, very recently actually as well. Does anyone want to finish up, wrap up with any questions about that?
Is there any limit to how far a remote viewer can see
No.
something? Like,
No, you can perceive anything. If you can write a target on it, you can perceive it. You can't remote view God. I'm serious, because you won't get any information. You just get a metaphor or a symbol. And plenty of people have tried to remote view God, myself included, and you won't get anything. It's beyond the human consciousness to understand. And actually, you won't get any information. You just you end up drawing a metaphor or something, or you get symbolic information. You won't get God. Sorry, I couldn't hear it.
Wouldn't the limit be the limit of what humanity knows?
Yes, yeah. But his name's gone now. He was a very famous American remote viewer. He remote viewed off planet a lot. He remote viewed the nearest star system with civilization similar to human beings, and he got a star system with. And he said that the water, he perceived a waterfall on the planet, and it changed colour like a rainbow as it came and flowed into the stream. There were streams of like rainbow colours in and things like that, and golden birds and stuff like that. Yeah. I'm going to have to stop because I'm getting a signal from Cheryl, but when I come back we'll talk about some other stuff and about Mars. Anyone want to know about Mars?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you for indulging me so far. Okay, I was going to talk about Mars. There was a book that came out in the 1960s actually, early 1960s, with this guy in America who said he was a psychic and he could see things. And he said that underneath the surface of Mars, there are people living in pressurized containers under Mars. And so I guess he would have been a natural remote viewer. And not Ingo Swann, it wasn't Ingo Swann, it was a guy who's some obscure name, I've forgotten the guy by one thing. And he said that there were people living under the surface of Mars in pressurized containers. And what had happened to Mars was that Mars had been sideswiped by a comet, not a very big one, but it ripped the gravity away. Now the gravity of Mars wasn't as dense as ours is here, and the Martians that they had a race there were quite tall, and they looked kind of like a cross between Mongol people and very sort of swarthy Native Americans. So they're quite a tall race. They sort of grew to sort of 6.5 feet tall. That was quite common. And they had a group of elders that were quite spiritual. And he wrote all this information down in a book. There's only about 3 copies left now. I'm trying to get one for a long time. I couldn't locate one. And so anyway, the military, when they got bored of remote viewing brick walls and missile silos, decided to do some of these esoteric targets. You see. And they remote viewed Mars, and they also found that there were people living under the surface of Mars in pressurized containers. Okay? Now the problem is that they are very anxious at the moment, and have been for some time, because they know that we have the ability to perceive them. Okay? And there's going to be big problems ahead, because in X amount of years, I can't remember exactly what it is, they're thinking about sending an expedition to Mars. Okay? So we've been told. Okay? 2025. Okay? The problem is that many people think that humans have already been to Mars. Okay? Now, the remote viewing data does show that there's people living under the surface of Mars in like pressurized containers, much like an aircraft when it's pressurized. And of course, you've all seen the Cydonia region, you've seen the pyramids there, and you've seen the face, blah blah. And they're not actually living under there; they're living under another region near there. But in April 2012, lots of amateur astronomers saw plumes of what appeared to be smoke coming off the surface of Mars. In fact, at one stage, I think the New Scientist magazine actually published pictures in the New Scientist magazine, because I couldn't believe it, this was in a mainstream magazine, that there were plumes of smoke, huge plumes of smoke coming up into, say smoke, or not debris or something like that, coming up, and it looked very much like an explosion. Okay? So that has been remote viewed. And there have been a lot of explosions happening on Mars, which may be of human origin. Okay? Now, it may be that they're blasting, so to speak, an area, and they may be terraforming an area of Mars. Terraforming it, they start building and making it. The people who live in these pressurized containers aren't happy about this, because basically it's imperialism, what's going on, you know? And it looks like they're building another place on the other side of where the Martians are, and I can't prove this. Again, remote viewing data, we don't have solid feedback to support it, but there are definitely explosions on Mars, and that's all been photographed, and that's definitely real, we know that. So if you trace back the origins of that, you can do a timeline of one of the protocols, you can trace back the origins, and it looks like there may be human origin. So it may look like, again, this is another NASA smokescreen, and they've already been there for quite a while. Whatever you think about Stephen Greer, his film Sirius was a very, very good film. And in it, you hear that man, and he discusses the fact that at Skunk Works, whatever you could imagine has been invented. And he basically admitted that they've got interstellar travel, and they've had for some time. Okay? So there's no reason to disbelieve that they're building some sort of human city, area on Mars, because they do have interstellar travel, and someone from NASA has actually admitted that they've got that. And all that stuff at Area 52, blah, 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 and it was built at Skunk Works, and it went to Area 52 and lots of stuff. So they basically have interstellar travel. And so, you remember Alternative 3? Who knows about Alternative, you know about Alternative 3? And all that sort of stuff with the global elite are waiting for us all to go to hell in a handbasket, and no bread left in coals, and they all get in this flying saucer and off they go, and we never see them again. And they've probably already found other planets where it's inhabitable. They've probably already done that. If they've got interstellar travel, they've done that. Because there's no point in having interstellar travel unless you have an objective of going to visit somewhere. It just doesn't make sense, does it? So they've obviously found other places to inhabit. Okay, and they're probably going to build some. It's probably feasible that they've been to Mars years and years ago, and it's all just a smoke screen. We're all left in the dark because we're not mature enough to know that sort of stuff. So that was very interesting. That's come up about Mars. Now, the Mars Observer satellite went there in 1992, and the Mars satellite suddenly went offline. And people at NASA were saying that Mars is jinxed, because they send satellites there and they go offline. And a couple of years before, a Russian satellite orbited Mars and it went offline. Okay? Now, what happened was that when those satellites get near Mars, and they happen to go over the Cydonia region and other regions where people are, where habitation can be seen, a tractor beam comes up from Mars it scans the satellite, but it buggers up their electrics. Okay, so it was not a malevolent act. It was purely a tractor beam that came up from the surface and took the satellites offline. Okay, but you've got to be careful, because if you send too many satellites and they'll get taken offline, obviously people get highly suspicious about that. But there's been 3 satellites to date, a Russian one and 2 Americans, that have been taken offline simply because a tractor beam came from the surface of the Mars. And you can find out Mars Observer. You can do something like this. You can put Mars Observer cause of malfunction. You see? And you give it a coordinate, see? And you go up there and you find it. And if you find that there's some beam or something, some energy has come into the satellite, you can do a movement exercise and trace back the origin of the energy that's coming to the satellite. And it goes back, and it went back to the surface of Mars. All right?
What is the tractor beam?
I'm using Star Trek terminology because I don't really know what it is. I don't know what it is. It's an energy beam. I don't know, to be honest, I don't know. You know? I'm using
It's something ETs use to abduct human beings.
It's something, a tractor beam. You know, we're saying Star Trek. That's why I use that. That's why I use that term. I really don't know what it is.
So
What it's made of.
Sorry.
That's
So it's
okay.
called out of remote viewing, just like this.
Yeah. That's your initial target. Mars Observer cause of malfunction. So first of all, you're going to get man-made structures and that sort of stuff, you know. So you find out you get a hit, what's called a hit on the target. Then as you go through the matrix, this is the sub-cube, this is the main cube, this is the sub-cube. Okay, you can actually have another cube. You can actually put origin. Okay, but it's harder to do that. It's probably better to do it in several sessions. Don't think you get all this information in one session. Sometimes it takes several sessions, 20 or 30. Just to get all the information about one target, you know. So then you might have another target where you trace back the origin of the malfunction. Okay, and then you find out that all the remote viewing that was done showed that it went back to the surface of Mars. So some energy, put it that way, came from the surface of Mars and looked at the satellite to see if there's any life on board or not. Because if there was, it wouldn't have been taken offline. You see. Now the Martians, they were only 300 to 400 years ahead of us in technology. So their craft, you could go up there and you could bang it and you'd hear a noise. You know, it was a metallic type craft. Okay, not like the higher beings where their ships are celestial. You know, and they're formed from consciousness. They're not that advanced. A Martian is look. We're being audacious using the word extraterrestrial. It's almost insulting. You know, we're extraterrestrial to them. You know, it's a bit insulting, really, to say they're extraterrestrials. We're alienating them. You know, we're alienating. That's a good one. We're alienating them using that term, aren't we? By saying they're ETs. They're a species. You know, they're a species. The Martians have lungs, and they have a physiology very similar to ours. They live about 200 years. They live about 100 years longer than we do because they've mastered healthcare and health and that sort of thing. They have a group of elders that are very spiritual, much like the indigenous culture, and it overlooks their. They have ministers of spirituality, stuff like that. You know?
Any idea how many?
How many? I'm talking about a few hundred people. Yeah.
And they don't have pharmaceutical companies.
The
Or
point
GMOs.
Well, if they did, they wouldn't last 200 years.
No, they wouldn't. No, they wouldn't. No, that's very true.
They don't have craft.
They have craft. Yeah, they have metal craft. Yeah, they have metal craft. Huh?
Why do they stay at the ground?
Because they need supplies from here.
Why don't they move somewhere else?
I don't know. Yeah, I can't answer those questions. I don't know why. I don't know why. I can't answer that question. One day when I go up there and I see them, when we've got Richard Branson's made the technology for us to go, well, I'll go and ask them. I don't know. When I'm being flippant, but I don't know why they've chosen to stay there. Maybe it's well, I mean, a lot of people, if something happened to Earth, a lot of people wouldn't leave Earth because it's home.
But you only got a couple of hundred people, and they're making craft.
That's not the total population, though, surely.
It's meant to be, yeah, not more than a few hundred. Yeah, it's not thousands. It's not thousands of people. It's a big planet.
Have they been left there, you know, from another race?
Some of them have gone away. Some of them have gone away, but some of them chose to stay. I'm sure that would happen on Earth too.
But a couple of hundred people making a craft is a big exercise.
Well, they've not made the craft. The craft have always been there.
All right.
You see, they're not made the craft. They haven't got skunk works and they're turning out 10 craft a day, a couple of hundred people, you know, on the conveyor belt. It's not. They just have crafts that have been there for a long time.
So their mother species could well have developed dramatically.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they're thinking that. Who was that ET race that were in Italy for a long time?
Oh, yes, the tall ones.
Something with an A. Something like that, yeah. They think that they are related to Martians. They think that because they're very tall beings, and they think that they could possibly be related to Martians. But this is not always provable. Remote viewing data, unless you have feedback to support it, it's not always provable. And some of it could be right, some of it could be, well, we've been guided off at a tangent somewhere. And you don't know if you're remote viewing ET races, and they're much more advanced than you consciously, consciously, that they're guiding you down the garden path. Yeah. I want to talk to you about the environmental devices that have been put on the Earth in various places. One was thought to be in Australia at Mount Zion, which is in the McDonnell Ranges. My Australian geography is not as good, but they're thought to be on Mount Zion, McDonnell Ranges.
Yeah, just west of just west of Bangor.
Now, this is going to sound a bit cliched, but there was a black box, a cliche. And Courtney Brown was told through a guy who worked in intelligence agencies that they wanted it remote viewed. They wanted it remote viewed by civilians, and they wanted it remote viewed by people who used to be in the military or were under contract still. Okay? And the thing was that there was several ET sightings seen in the desert in America, and something was seen to be buried in the earth, quite far down, so it couldn't be removed. And the remote viewing showed that it was a box. Now, when I say a black box, it's cubist shaped, it's shaped like a cube, but it has energy in it. It's almost like the box itself is conscious, okay? And it's basically monitoring the environment. And there's said to be several of these, quite a few put in different places around the world, and several of them have actually been removed now. They've been taken, about half of them have been taken, okay? Now what it does is, it monitors the changes over a year, okay? And because it monitors the changes over a year, that information can be calculated as to what will happen in 100 years. Does that make sense? Yep. So all it needs to do is be here for a short space of time. They say if you want to find out what's going to happen in the economy, you can do economic modelling. So it's doing a form of modelling. Okay, it's doing geographical environmental modelling. So it's basically monitoring everything that's happening in that region for a year, and it's taken away, and they can use that to determine what will happen over a couple of centuries. Okay, so 50% of them have been taken away now, and 50% of them are still there. Okay, so I thought I'd tell you that because we don't know the outcome of that. But obviously, the fact that they put them there doesn't bode well. Does it really? And this was only about, this was probably around the year 1999, 2000. So some of them are still there, and some of them were taken out within a year or so.
Can you clarify who they are?
Greys.
Oh, right.
They
So
were Greys.
ET's not the government or...
No, sorry, it's Greys put
Okay.
them there. The ET Greys put them there. A very advanced grey race put them there. That was definitely identified as who it was that put them there.
The first time to put them there? No?
Yes, the first time they've been put there, so that doesn't really bode well.
So is it the same people taking it away? Or
Yes, yeah, same with taking them away, yeah. The CIA have been out there, tried to dig them up and all that, but it's been put very, very deep. Where you'd have to have big drilling rigs and all that sort of stuff, and that sort of stuff. It's not feasible. And by the time you get down there, they've been taken away anyway.
How did they find out that they were there?
Well, the intelligence, someone from the intelligence agency came and spoke to Courtney Brown and said, we know there's something going on with this technology. I didn't say how. We want it remote viewed so we can compare civilian data, because the military know there's hundreds of people in the civilian world who are good remote viewers. There's people walking down the road out there who are fantastic remote viewers. You know, I'm not saying I'm fantastic. I've been trained to do it. I'm not a natural psychic. I trained in my sheer dedication. I got to the stage where I was getting reasonably good at it. But I'm not in Glenn's state. I mean, he's somewhere else. You know, he's streets ahead of people.
So then you say, how they knew there was something there?
No. But various... They apparently they say that they know at various times and places when UFOs are going to come through. So that's sort of known. Okay, so what I'm going to tell you, I was just going to talk to you about a couple of spiritual things, which do have a bit of a bearing on the ET thing. But what I will tell you is that in 1996, when I was at Farsight, one of the senior instructors, a female, I'm not going to name her because she might not want me to name her, actually drew a picture of 2 aircraft flying into the Twin Towers. Okay? And the intelligence people came and they actually gave her that target, the next terrorist attack in America. Okay? Now some people are very good at remote viewing the future because the future is already known. Okay? We only have time. I mean, I can talk about time all night. I mean, if I ever get invited back again, I'll talk about time because that has a big relation to the ETs. And time is not what we've been told. Okay? There's all kinds of stuff about time that's been discovered with various things. Just to take 3 hours to talk about that. But anyway, what we thought back then was that if we remote viewed a target, the timeline would change. We thought that because we remote viewed a target and there was an awareness in the consciousness that this thing was going to happen, that we could change the timeline, but it's been shown to be false. It was remote viewed, 9/11, by a couple of people, and pictures of the Twin Towers being hit by planes was taken away by intelligence people. Okay? And I'm telling you now, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that the intelligence agencies knew in the late 90s that something was going to hit this town. It's absolutely, definitely known. I can say that 100% without any bullshit or in all humility, that it was known back in the 90s that something big was going to go down.
Because Americans did it.
Yeah. And there was... So, you know, so it's a really very, very sad world that we're living in at the time. Okay, I want to talk to you about... have you heard of the Book of Urantia? Yeah. Okay. The Book of Urantia is a spiritual tome, I suppose, and it's not easy it's not like bedtime reading, for those of you who've seen it, I've got a copy. And, God, I tried reading it once. If you want to fall asleep, it's good. But it supposedly charts the true spiritual history of mankind. Now, if you go back to the Vedas of India, they claim to have the earliest spiritual writings of man's spirituality laid down. And having read some of the translations of the Vedas, I can understand why. So the Book of Urantia kind of goes on where the Vedas left off. Okay? Now, in the Book of Urantia, it talks about various beings. And there's a group of beings in the Book of Urantia called the midwayers. Okay? That's their official name, the midwayers. Okay? And the midwayers are just outside of our human perception. Okay? So they're just between the physical world and the non-physical world. Okay? Now the midwayers, if you have a near-death experience, a being of light comes to get you, because they say you never die alone. Okay? And that being of light is a midwayer. Okay? Now those beings of light have a lot of light concentrated around their head, and of course, historically, that's where the halo came from, of angels. Okay? And they move very quickly because they're quite small beings. They're not tall or gigantic, they're sort of about half the size of us. And they move very quickly, and because of that, people have attributed wings to them. Okay? Now, I don't want to offend anybody who's uses angels in their life. It's not what I'm here to do. But it does seem that what we call angels are in fact the group of beings known as the midwayers, because they're midway between the physical and the non-physical world. Now it seems their function is to assist humanity in their transition from the physical world to the non-physical world, and also to assist us while we're in the physical plane. Okay? Now, the reason why near-death experiences have been extensively remote viewed, and the reason why you are met by a being of light is because we've lost our connection to the source. Okay? If you have a connection to the source, a midwayer doesn't come to meet you. Okay? Because there's the light. We all know the near-death experience literature. There's the light. How am I going to get to the light? Oh, here comes a being of light, takes you to the light. Okay? They're taking you home. Okay? If you have a connection to source, you don't have a midwayer come to you. You just go. You just have a phase shift in your consciousness and you're home. Okay? Guy's name is eluding me. Monroe. Robert Monroe, who wrote the famous books about near-death experiences, talks about the first place you go to when you die is called the park. He called it the park. It's like a reception room, okay? And that's the first place you go to when you go through the light, okay? So if you've lost your connection to source, and most people have, okay, unless you do certain processes, like the oneness blessing, where you have the Diksha, you have a non-denominational transfer of spiritual energy, okay, then you're reconnected to source. Okay? If you have that quite a few times, you don't have a nice being of light come to meet you, although they're probably friendly. Okay? You go straight home to source. Okay? So the reason that those beings of light come to get you is because human beings have lost their connection to spiritual source. Okay? So they have to take you back. Alright? It's good news and bad news. It's good news that someone takes you home. It's bad news that we've lost our connection to spiritual source.
What is home?
Home? Home is a non-physical location, and the non-physical location, what it looks like, is going to depend on what your belief systems were when you were alive. Okay, so if you're a Muslim, it's going to appear differently to you than it might a Christian, or it might. I know I'm non-denominational, but I believe in God. You know, so it will appear to me as my beliefs were programmed in my physical existence. Okay? That's what it is. This, for us, is hell. Physical existence is hell. Okay? And it is. We know that sometimes life can be hellish. For many people, they suffer.
So if we go to a home to reincarnate,
you can reincarnate, yes, if you want to. Most people do.
and what happens if you don't go into the light?
If you don't go into the light, you'll be lost. You'll be like a lost soul. And people can come and retrieve you. Robert Monroe used to go and retrieve people. You know, I'm getting out the realms of remote viewing now because that was done astrally, okay, like we were talking about earlier. So that's going out of the realms of my knowledge. But basically, if you don't go into the light, no one collects you, you will be in limbo, basically. Okay, so you have to have someone come and collect you, or you have to try to renew your connection to spiritual source. Okay? I lost my thread slightly there. Where was I going with that? Midwayers, yeah. Now, when I was a nurse for many years, my first career. A friend of mine said to me that this guy in the room was dying, and of course he was miserable and pretty fed up, as you would be. And he didn't have any relatives, he didn't have any family, so she was in there with him. And typical reports you'll hear from nursing staff, and myself included, I've seen this, is that people are miserable, and right at the end, there's a smile on their face. And they say something like, oh, Mum's here, or Fred's here, or something, and then they smile, and they pass away very peacefully. And as this guy passed away peacefully, she saw a blue glow at the side of his bed. And he actually looked over in that direction and smiled, and then he passed away. So whether that was a midwayer, or whether that was some other spiritual entity, but it's probably likely to be a midwayer, because they can at times, as I said, they're midway between our physical and non-physical perception. So that's something there that I'll just give you. But interestingly, they are there to promote man's spiritual evolution. Therefore, that means that our lives have purpose. Okay? If our lives didn't have purpose, why would they be there? Okay? So we've got lots of speculation going on at the moment around the world about, you know, the shadow side is rearing its ugly head again. I certainly feel it, that it is. And of course it's being threatened because there's more awareness of it. So because there's more awareness of it, it's rearing its ugly head even more because it feels insecure. So you're going to see that for a while. Okay, you're going to see. I mean, now stuff that David Icke was talking about 20 to 25 years ago have now become mainstream. You know, people know there are false flag operations in the world. People know this stuff that David Icke was called a flake about 25 years ago. So it's rearing its ugly head because there's more awareness about it. The light is being shone more on the darkness, so it's rearing its ugly head a bit, you see. So I wanted to tell you about the midwayers because there's a sense that spiritually, many of us are moving in the right direction. The issue is, are there enough of us, and are we moving fast enough? That's my own personal little fear, okay? But the fact that the midwayers are there is a comfort to us because they've been put here to help our spiritual evolution, okay? And that is a positive sign, okay? So I just wanted to tell you that so that you hopefully we finish up.